Hey everybody, it's Ben from Policy Matters Ohio. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn about the costs and consequences of flat taxes. Now, in just a moment, I'll be joined by Policy Matters tax experts. But first, a quick reminder, you can find all of our work online at policymattersohio.org. You can join our small and growing YouTube community. Just search Policy Matters Ohio on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Policy Matters OH, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook at Policy Matters Ohio. All right, so let's get into this. So Ohioans of every race and every place and every background, we all get that we benefit from strong public services. We understand that great schools, well-maintained roads and bridges, timely trash pickup, they all require us to pool our resources by paying our taxes. And Ohio voters agree, we'll talk about this in a moment, that the wealthy should be paying more in taxes because those who do well in Ohio should do right by Ohioans. But now we have certain Ohio lawmakers pushing flat tax schemes in the legislature that would force Ohioans to choose between two bad options in the long term. Either we'd have to raise other kinds of taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, etc., or we'd have to make big cuts to schools and senior services and all kinds of other important public programs. So we'll get into the details with our experts in just a moment. But in general, I want to go over four important ideas about flat income tax policies. Number one, they do little or nothing for people with low and middle incomes. That's a heck of a lot of people in Ohio. Number two, they hand large amounts of money to people who are already wealthy. Number three, they reduce the resources available for important public services. And number four, and this is what we're working with today, they depend on people just not thinking too much about the long-term costs and consequences. So we're here to make sure that doesn't happen and to spread the word. People who are selling you on a flat tax are telling you a flat lie. So with me today to discuss, we have our research director, Zach Schiller. You can follow him on Twitter at PZSchiller. That's at PZSCHILLER. And Guiche Berbehicho, he's our state policy fellow. He holds a PhD in economic geography from The Ohio State University. You can follow him on Twitter at GEE_SH_EH. That's Guiche on Twitter. You can find his most recent analysis of HB1, one of the current flat tax proposals. You can find that on our website, policymattersohio.org/flatlie. So I'm going to just sort of start off by asking Guiche about that work that he's been doing on HB1. Guiche, what's being proposed in HB1? What do we know about it?
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for having us here, and it's a pleasure to be here. So HB1, House Bill 1, is as the name states, it's the first bill of the House for this General Assembly. So it traditionally, that indicates a level of priority from the majority caucus. So in this case, the Republicans. It indicates that it's one of their top priorities. And basically, what it is a flat tax. A flat tax for everybody over $26,000 yearly income. You go from paying a graduated tax rate that adjusts according to your ability to pay to a flat 2.75% tax rate. Now, this is for a lot of middle income families. This is very little change in their very little to no change in their income taxes. For wealthier families who are currently paying the top tax rate of 3.99%, it's closer to a little bit over a 1% change in their tax income. But it adds up. It adds up to a significant amount, and I think we'll be talking more about what our estimates of the impact are. But basically, the other element of House Bill 1 is a realization that there's only one way. Well, there's two ways, but there's one major way to deal with this sort of tax cut, which is by cutting services in one way or another. So the other half of House Bill 1 is a change in the property tax scheme. They take out this tax credit called the 10% rollback, in which the state covers 10% of your property tax, and they totally take that out and reduce the state support for local authorities like townships, libraries, so on, by that 10%, adding up to over $1.2 billion. Now, there's some other more complicated questions where they're trying to, according to them, they're trying to ensure that taxpayers don't see an increase in their property tax bill. The fact of the matter is when the sponsored testimony happened just recently, they had to admit that there's some constitutional elements of that they're dealing with, the Ohio Constitution, that they can't get around, that kind of guarantees that property taxes will pay for what needs to be paid for all those local taxing authorities. So they haven't really worked out the details of how they're going to ensure that people don't pay more property taxes, but they're doing some more complicated things about reducing the assessed value of property so as to reduce your property taxes. There are a few other smaller elements to the bill, including some expansion of the homestead exemption, which reduces property taxes for certain targeted populations, for older folk and for veterans. But those are the two major ideas that should be taken away from this are the flat tax, which amounts to a tax cut for the wealthy, and paying for it by changing the property tax scheme to reduce state support for local authorities by over $1.2 billion.
That's a lot. Okay. It sounds troubling, and I know we're going to get a little bit more into those details. I also know that, Zach, you sent me an email just the other day, maybe it was yesterday, after listening into some sponsored testimony in favor of HB1. So what can you tell us about that testimony? What did we learn from the sponsors then?
Well, there was about an hour's worth of discussion of it at the hearing the other day before the House Ways and Means Committee. I can summarize it went on for a while, but I'll summarize 4 or 5 key things that I took away from it. One is that they want to take $1.2 billion from schools and local governments, as well as additional monies from public libraries, cities, and villages. They also haven't really figured out how to do 3 things at the same time: slash income taxes for the most affluent people, pay for it by grabbing money from local governments, and do so without increasing property taxes. And that's what they're intending to do. However, they haven't been able to accomplish that with the bill as it is now. They express concern about keeping local governments whole, but they have no specific plan to do so. And as the ranking Democrat on the committee, Representative Troy, said, we've seen this movie before, where the General Assembly said it would protect local governments, but then reneged on that promise when it cut taxes at the state level. He presented, I think, a good case of that Ohio has all of these unmet needs. They range from not paying our home health care workers anywhere near what they need, to not having the services we need for the elderly. We haven't fully funded our school funding plan. We aren't providing adequate transportation. We've got all of these needs and many more: lead poisoning, college affordability, and yet at the same time, we want to take a huge amount of money and give it away to people who don't need it. Their key description of why this is needed and why they justify it is that they think that somehow by cutting the income tax, this is going to bring people to Ohio, that they're going to be attracted by lower income tax rates. And this just isn't supported by the evidence, and is really the only key explanation they give for why this giant transfer of funds and loss of public services is justifiable.
that just comes, so much of this just comes across as like kind of silly and wishful thinking. That's neither here nor there. I'm just struck by that. But to go back to Guiche, you did a brief that's available again on our website at policymattersohio.org/flatlie, in which you did some actual analysis of what will happen as a result of HB1. Can you talk about that analysis and what you found?
Sure. So you know, a lot of this, a lot of the analysis I ran is just with public information about the taxing schedule, the tax rates, and the tax data that's on the Ohio Department of Taxation. Some of it also came from our partners in the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy, who have a sophisticated model of local and state level taxation, and they run a simulation to see the impact of it. But basically, the impact for anybody who doesn't already pay income taxes is zero. They get nothing from this. But in fact, because of the way taxes are calculated, anybody, we all have a certain amount of personal exemptions or exemptions based on dependents that we calculate into our tax liability. So actually, for families earning less than $30,000, they get nothing as well. If you're a family that's earning about $50,000 a year, you might get, if you're lucky, you might get a total of $3 in tax savings. $3.
Did you say $30?
No. 3. 3. So nothing. I mean, it's pathetic. You know, two-thirds of Ohioans, two-thirds of Ohio taxpayers make less than $75,000 a year. 60%. Well, yeah, and 60%, not two-thirds. Sorry, 60%. So, two-thirds of Ohio gets pennies on the dollar, and it doesn't start becoming a significant impact on your tax liability until you're up in the highest tax wealth ranges. So if you're in the top 20% of Ohio, now you're starting to make some tax savings. But let's be clear. So 89% of the value of this tax cut goes to that top 20%. About 35 of the value goes to the top 1%. So you can imagine what that curve looks like, right? And to be clear, even if you are in that top range, even if you're making, for example, Representative Matthews in testimony the other day said that, we want to be competitive to attract those doctors and engineers. If you're a doctor or engineer making $300,000 a year, right? Like a pretty wealthy doctor or engineer, not any other, the impact on your tax liability might be $2,700, less than 1% of your yearly income. And, for me, that would be a significant amount of money. For most Ohioans, that's a lot of money. But is it going to make the difference for a doctor to choose to come to Ohio versus somewhere else? I think you have to be pretty disconnected from reality to believe that. I mean, the things that are going to determine a doctor's decision to come to Ohio have to do with, like, the beauty, the thriving communities, the education levels, the capacity to live a full life. Not $2,700 at the end of the day, but it adds up, right? According to our analysis, we're talking about over $2 billion of costs for this bill, right? $2 billion. So what does make an impact on people's decisions to live in Ohio or not? It's like, are there potholes on the street, right? Are the schools for their children, do they have like a decent teacher to student ratio? Is there AC in the schools? Like the basic kind of stuff that taxpayer dollars pay for, right? This is what determines whether or not the community is thriving, not whether, the doctor can go on an additional vacation to the Bermudas or something like that. So I think that covers the major issues. Again, barely $3 for a middle income family, more than $5,000 for somebody making over $500,000 a year, and a cost of $2 billion. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah, that is wild, just to think of how little the average person or the median household would see compared to like how much we all benefit from public services. And what's interesting is that while these details apply specifically to HB1, the first of the flat tax proposals happening or being considered in the House, there is another one that's being kicked around from Derek Marin's caucus. And Zach, I know that you've looked into this proposal. I know the details aren't the same, and we may not have quite the same level of analysis. But what do we know about that one? Is it similar, or better, or worse?
Well, Representative Marin's proposal is not fleshed out, unlike what Guichet described, unlike House Bill 1, which at least is a bill that you can look at. But what it is a much more extreme version of the same, in that it would reduce the flat tax down to 2.5%, which is less than 2.75 in House Bill 1. So that will mean further losses in state revenue and reductions in public services or increases in other taxes to make up for it. But also, I think most disturbingly, they want to go to eliminating the personal income tax altogether on a multi-year time frame. And the reason they say a multi-budget, and we have a 2-year budget, so that means over at least, 6 or 8 years, is because the Ohio income tax is the second biggest source of revenue that the state has. It's bringing in over $10 billion a year. It's something like 30% or more of all the revenue that we get from state taxes. And so to eliminate it, if we've been talking here already about what some of the consequences would be if we were to reduce our tax by $2 billion, as House Bill 1 would, think about multiplying that by 5. That's more than we spend from our regular operating budget on primary and secondary education. It's 5 times as much as we spend on supporting our colleges and universities or running the state prisons. You're talking about taking a meat axe to public services as we know them in Ohio today. And the only alternative to that is raising other taxes. And if you raise the other taxes, inevitably, what that will mean is higher taxes for lower and middle income Ohioans when you've shifted this giant amount away from people who make the most, as Guichet has just described. So this is a proposal that we haven't yet seen fleshed out, but we've already seen some approving words from the president of the Ohio Senate on it. And I think we have to take quite seriously the possibility that there will be a move to actually repeal the income tax altogether.
I mean, that, like when Guichet was describing the outcome or the effects of HB1, I thought, okay, that sounds very bad. We don't want that. But now, Zach, what you're describing, it sounds cataclysmic. It sounds like it would be hard to go on as a state. I cannot imagine how work like ours at Policy Matters Ohio would be, like how much more work we would have to do, considering how much damage such an idea would do to the state support systems that we advocate for. Which reminds me, if you want to support our work, you can always do so at policymattersohio.org/donate. Now, we appreciate donations one-time or recurring, but we also just really appreciate folks tuning in, listening, spreading the word, elevating our work and analysis, or just talking to your friends and neighbors about these issues. So donations are great, but your participation and engagement is really what matters. So thank you for all of you folks who have done that, those of you who are tuning in now, and those of you who will sort of elevate this content in the future. Which brings me to my next point. We have a comment in the comments section. It's not unfamiliar to me. It's not unfamiliar to anybody who does this work. We hear a lot of this, especially from folks on Twitter. And so I want to give our experts a chance to respond publicly to this claim, more or less that, quote, the only fair kind of tax is a flat tax because it's when everyone pays the same share of their income. Now, like I've been hit with this question or this comment so many times that it makes my mind numb. So I'm going to pass this over to the people who really understand the topic and can kind of give this the kind of once and for all treatment it deserves. Zach or Guichet, what do you think about that?
I think you got to back up and you got to understand how the state and local tax system works. And we have a state and local tax system in Ohio in which low-income people are already paying almost twice as much of their income in state and local taxes as the most affluent of us do, of people making over $500,000 a year. And that's because we pay lower and middle income people pay more sales and excise and property taxes as a share of their income than the most affluent do. And this is in effect transferring income every year from the lower and middle income people to the richest people in the state. That's what our current tax system does. The only major countervailing part of the tax system is the personal income tax, which actually does tax people according to their income level. So as your income goes up, you pay a higher rate on it. To go to a flat tax for the income tax would eliminate that. So what it would do is it would reinforce our existing inequity in our state and local tax system. It would mean that top income people would be paying a lot less, as our reports, as Guiche has described. And when you pile that on top of the existing system, what that means is that you're making the system even more inequitable, even more weighted against the people who can least afford it. You're also doing nothing really to make the system any fairer or simple. You say a flat tax. Oh, it sounds real simple. Well, it's not all that hard to figure out what your tax is once you've got everything, once you've done your income tax form, you can look up what your tax is, So I think there's sort of this easy appeal of the idea that because it's a flat tax, somehow that makes it simpler or that somehow that makes it easier. And it does nothing of the sort. What it does is it transfers a huge amount of additional income to the people who least need it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to to reiterate what Zach was saying. The poor people in Ohio pay more as a share of their income in taxes than the rich do. It's plain and simple. There's more than one tax. It's not just the income tax. It's sales, excise, property taxes, all these types of taxes. They add up in that way. So you can't just doing the flat income tax is actually dealing with some of the other taxes that are not quite as fair. I think that it's important to get over this myth of kind of like the independent entrepreneur. If somebody is doing well in Ohio, it's because they have well-trained workers. It's because they have strategic logistical location. They have infrastructure that they're using. They have a customer base that can afford their products, right? So it's to do well in Ohio is not some kind of it's not independent of the conditions, the political and economic conditions of Ohio. And what makes that possible is the tax income, the revenue, right? The income tax. And yeah, so it's I think that it's crucial to repeat that point over and over again. The wealthy people in Ohio pay less in taxes. And part of that also has to do, just one last thing, is that wage income is not the only form of income, right? Your wages, when you're a middle class family, wages are the majority of your income, right? But as you get wealthier and wealthier, you depend more on other forms of income through stocks and dividends and these kinds of things. So I think it's really crucial in business income. It's really crucial for people to understand that again, it's sold as a simplicity. It's sold as like a simplifier, but it actually is obfuscating. It's forgetting about the context in which this is all happening.
I'm so grateful for the two of you who can put into words why that myth is a myth, because to me it becomes frustrating, and I just kind of feel overwhelmed when I have to field that question and that comment so frequently. Okay, so I'm getting some information from our producer and outreach director, Daniel Ortiz, that we are running a little bit low on time. So I'll just remind you both of that and ask for your responses to the next couple questions to be, concise. So I want to ask Zach about, we've talked a little bit about this already, so maybe this isn't too bad. What does the flat tax mean for schools and other local public services?
Okay, I did want to get in here as well that this is a fiscally irresponsible move when you take billions of dollars out of the state treasury. But looking at what the impacts are, this would affect schools, and all manner of public services, the way this bill would work right now. It takes money that goes to cities and villages and libraries and whacks it so that the Ohio Library Council found that just the reduction in income tax revenue alone would cost libraries $25 to $34 million a year across the state. Hamilton County has estimated $27 million that they'll lose. The way this is structured now, it would reduce the amount of levy money that comes in because they're claiming, or they want to take 10% of the property tax that the state now pays in effect and eliminate that. And so that means that if you have a mental health levy, if you have a children's services levy, if you have a mental health, if you have any kind of levy like that, more than likely, especially if it began more than 10 years ago, you're going to see less money coming in from that levy, or at least that's the sponsor's intent. One of the reps at the meeting the other day said, the head of the Cleveland, the local metro parks, has said, we're going to lose millions of dollars from this. So we're talking not just about schools, as if that's not bad enough, and libraries. We've got parks, we've got community colleges, so it's really would have a pretty major impact on all manner of public services around the state.
Nice, thanks, Zach. So, so the question obviously is like, what are some better options? What can we do that wouldn't be as absurd as this? Guiche, what do we know about sort of proactive tax plans?
Sure. So this is very simple. There is different ways, but we could institute a tax system that is based on your ability to pay. So we can institute some higher tax rates on the wealthiest Ohioans. If you earn over $250,000, over $500,000 per year, there is an important amount of tax expenditures, amount of lost revenue we have about 154 tax expenditures, which amount to $11 billion per year of lost revenue that we have basically no oversight over, because there's no the commission to review it was abolished. So even some oversight over that and dealing with some of the ones that that continue to drain state resources could be important. I think we should abolish most of those 154 probably. Additionally, in one in particular I talk about is the LLC loophole, the business income deduction, which is basically an accounting scheme that allows you to forego taxes on the first $250,000 of business income. So that in of itself could provide another $1 billion to all the critical community services that are needed across the state. The last thing I'd say is there are ways to ensure that that there's relief for families and low income households. We could make a refundable EITC, earned income tax credit, to ensure that the people who need it most receive it. We've also proposed a Thriving Families tax credit, which is based on the success of the child tax credit from 21, which would basically pay out a flat amount to families with children per children to ensure that they have the capacity to provide for those children and to cement the foundation for the next generation of Ohioans.
And it sounds like, well, one thing I just want to point out is that Guiche is describing a proactive tax agenda that we've got on our website in full, policymattersohio.org/proactive tax. So you can check that out there. We're running a little bit low on time, but I know that it's worth pointing out our work with Data for Progress that shows that Ohioans support a lot of what Guiche was just talking about. Guiche, do you want to run through that?
Absolutely. So, we've run some data on this with Data for Progress. I think you can see it on your screen. 71% of likely voters support increasing taxes on people making over $250,000 and another even higher rate on people making over $500,000. So what you can see there is, across the board, throughout Ohio, wherever you are, people support ensuring that people pay their fair share. This is what fairness is about all paying according to our ability to pay.
Yeah, that's great. And the findings from that part, the part about raising taxes on the wealthy, and our other poll findings are available at policymattersohio.org/data for progress. You can check that out anytime. So just to wrap things up here, we're just about at time, but we can talk a little bit past this. I just want to tell folks sort of what you can do about this, right? We now are pretty much on the same page that flat tax proposals, regardless of the details, are a bad idea. So what can you do? You can first find the name of and the contact information for your state representatives and state senators. Tell them to oppose any form of a flat tax. You don't have to name a particular bill. You can just say anything that has a flat income tax, say no to that. You can also, if you'd like to sign a petition, you can do that at our website, policymattersohio.org/no-flat-tax. It's also at the bottom of Guiche's analysis that we were plugging at the beginning, the /flat lie. That same petition is there, so you can access it either way. One quick programming note, our next live stream is going to be a little bit different from this one. It'll happen a week from today, Thursday the 9th, but it'll be in the evening, 6:30. We're calling it Food for Thought, Why Budgets Matter. It's going to be a live stream of a live in-person event. So if you happen to be in Cleveland, you can join us at Happy Dog at 6:30, or tune in however you're tuning in right now to watch a live stream. We'll be joined by our partners at Noble and PB Clee for a conversation about why budgets matter and how you can get involved. It'll feature our own executive director, Hannah Halbert, and our outreach director and super producer, Daniel Ortiz, who's on the ones and twos this afternoon. Finally, one last time, you can follow us on Twitter at PolicyMattersOH. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook at PolicyMattersOhio, and find all of our work on policymattersohio.org. Oh, and just search for us on YouTube. You can join our community there. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for having your lunch with us. Those of us who didn't eat during this, we'll go have a salad now, and we'll talk to you again soon.